In the spring of 2006, an archaeological discovery was announced that shook the theories held up until then about Peru's ancient civilizations. In the very deepest part of a tomb some 1,700 years old, an intact funerary bundle was found that contained the mummy of a noble personage. The grave goods corresponded to those of a ruler from the Moche culture, similar to those found years before at Sipan. But there was something truly unprecedented about the find. The mummy did not belong to a man, but to a woman. The news of the discovery of the Lady of Cao, as she began to be known since she had been found in the Cao Viejo pyramid, revolutionized the hypotheses that the international archaeological community had formed about Peru's pre-Columbian societies. She was the first woman ruler to be found, an absolutely extraordinary event. No one had thought that a woman could have occupied an important post in these ancient civilizations, much less that she could have wielded power.
The discovery of the Señora de Cao, the Lady of Cao, has been extremely important to Peruvians in tracing their national heritage into the deep past. One of the other important things, however, is that this discovery has shown the world that people do things differently in different places, and that women had extremely important roles in politics and culture and religion in ancient Peru.
This is the story of a people who inhabited Peru's north coast 2,000 years ago, and of their enigmatic queen, the Lady of Cao. Of a civilization that reached a level of technological development that is an enormous surprise to us today. Of a powerful people that feared only their gods, to whom they attributed the appearance of the El Niño phenomenon, and to whom they offered human sacrifices to appease their anger. Of an ancient society that allowed women to rule. This is the story of a great archaeological find. The tomb of the Lady of Cao, the first woman ruler found up to now. The coast of Peru, between the Andes Mountains and the Pacific Ocean, is a strip of desert 2,500 kilometers long by some 200 kilometers wide. It's the continuation of the Atacama Desert in Chile, considered the most arid on the planet. The Humboldt Current, which flows up from the Antarctic, is the source of the cold waters that rise off the coast of Peru, limiting evaporation and preventing the formation of large clouds. This cold current is very rich in plankton, making these waters one of the world's most important fishing grounds. The dryness of the desert is broken by fertile valleys watered by the numerous rivers that descend from the Andes, which give rise to unique ecosystems like the dry forests made up mainly of carob trees. The Moche, also called the Mochica, were already making use of carob trees 2,000 years ago because of their very hard wood. These forests are true oases of life dominated by species endemic to the region, such as the spectacled bear. The north coast of Peru was the cradle of cultures thousands of years old. Abundant archaeological remains can be found of these ancient Peruvian civilizations, such as that of the Moche, which dominated these lands from the 1st to the 7th centuries AD. Their religious and ceremonial centers testify to the high level of technology they reached. They look like ridges or hills, but in reality they are pyramids built with millions of adobe bricks. Over time, they have acquired this appearance due to the visits of the El Niño phenomenon. The torrential rains have eroded their exterior surfaces, but inside we can see the bricks with which these colossal constructions were built. The El Brujo archaeological complex is found on a geological platform that covers 100 hectares in the Chicama Valley, 60 kilometers to the northeast of the city of Trujillo. The pyramid of Huaca Prieta stands on the southern part and is 5,000 years old. The other two pyramids, Huaca Cortada and Huaca de Cao Viejo, are later and belong to the Moche culture. This platform has a great capacity for drainage and is protected from the floods produced by the El Niño phenomenon or by the occasional tsunamis because it stands 6 meters above sea level. This natural haven has been inhabited without interruption since the pre-pottery era. Huaca Cortada has not yet been excavated officially, although the damage produced by the attempts to loot it over the last 100 years are evident. This cut gave it its name. Some of the discoveries made at the Huaca de Cao Viejo are so surprising that they have made this unique pyramid indispensable to the study of the Moche culture. This is what the Cao Viejo pyramid may have looked like in its time. During a routine inspection halfway up the pyramid, the archaeologist Regulo Franco observed some painted adobe bricks. They began to dig, and a wall appeared, decorated with paintings of fish within diagonal stripes. After consolidating the walls, a profusely decorated room was revealed. We can see represented in its mural paintings the constant duality of the Moche world through the depictions of freshwater pencil catfish and saltwater manta rays. In the ceremonial room, the zoomorphic drawings represent the moon animal, related with the underworld. There were some pots half buried in the floor that turned out to be the markers for 5 tombs. The main burial site was found under a marker that depicted an owl. A short time later, Regulo Franco reached the bottom of the pit and brought up an intact funerary bundle that weighed a little over 100 kilos. The quality of these images is poor. They were taken with a home video camera, but they are the only filmed document that preserves this discovery and the later unwrapping of the bundle in the laboratory. Under the protection of a shaman, as the region's traditions require, the bundle was taken from the dig to the laboratory. At the time, no one could have imagined that they had just made one of the most important discoveries in the history of Peruvian archaeology, the body of the Lady of Cao. The bundle's state of conservation was surprisingly good. Thanks to the special conditions of the El Brujo geological platform and the placement of the tomb in the upper half of the pyramid, the tomb was never affected by water. The schematic drawing of an embroidered face indicated the cadaver's position in the funerary bundle. It looks like the surface of the moon. Each crater is a pit dug by the Huaqueros, or tomb raiders. Until the 1990s, when it was placed under official protection, the looting at this archaeological site was tremendous.
El huaquerismo es una práctica clandestina que tiene mucho arraigo en la costa norte del Perú. Este complejo arqueológico del Brujo estuvo saqueado durante muchas décadas. En 1990 llegamos con el doctor Guillermo Vice de Osma a este sitio y encontramos grupos de huaqueros saqueando tumbas. En conversaciones con los huaqueros posteriormente nos indicaron que ellos En una de estas huacas habían descubierto relieves mochicas que nunca se habían encontrado. Esos relieves que vimos en 1990 son los mismos que hoy vemos en el templo Moche.
Thanks to the decisive efforts of Dr. Guillermo Viese de Osma, known to his friends as Pancho, they were able to save this archaeological site from further plundering. The Viese Foundation has made possible the momentous discoveries that have been made in recent years.
Pancho estaba convencido de que ahí en la huaca rajada, en la huaca esta de Cao, se iba a encontrar, de todos modos, un personaje importante. Cuando nosotros insistíamos en que todo eso era más fantasía que realidad, él decía que debíamos recordar algún día que efectivamente allí se encontraría un personaje que iba a ser simbólico en toda la arqueología peruana. Y así ocurrió, lamentablemente, cuando él ya no estaba.
The mural of the chosen ones, who were led to the sacrifice in the ceremonial patio at Cao Viejo, is a distant echo of the ceremonies of atonement that were carried out in this sacred site. In the laboratory at the dig, the conservators continued to work on the funerary bundle that had been recovered from a Moche tomb more than 1,700 years old. They gradually unrolled each one of the cotton cloths wrapping the funerary bundle with extreme care. They couldn't imagine that they were drawing closer and closer to a historic moment in Peruvian archaeology. But the first X-ray images revealed something that, until then, was inconceivable. They could clearly identify the gold and silver ornaments contained in the bundle. There was no doubt that it held a Mochica ruler, but the scientist John Verano, a doctor in physical anthropology from the University of Tulane, disclosed to them the bundle's most astounding secret, that it held the mummy of a woman. And so the Lady of Cao began to tell the story of her people 1,700 years after her death. Little by little, the ornaments within the funerary bundle began to take shape. The work was slow and meticulous. The bundle is the only example of a Moche burial with the skin, soft tissues, textiles, clothing, and metals without any sign of corrosion. All the Moche burials found up till then along the coast of Peru had been exposed to water and the avalanches caused by the El Niño phenomenon, so they only contained bones and metals in an advanced state of corrosion. The El Niño phenomenon conditioned the lives of these peoples. They believed that its arrival depended on the mood of their gods. The change in the atmospheric pressure in the tropics of the Pacific Ocean near Australia causes the winds to change direction and blow from west to east. The temperature of the sea rises from 3 to 7 degrees Celsius and produces unusually high levels of evaporation, and thus torrential rains.
Los antiguos peruanos tenían muy presente esta condición anual del niño. Y esta condición además irregular y absolutamente caótica. Hay años en el que el niño puede ser normal, digamos, cambios mínimos que se den en la temperatura del mar, y años en los cuales el niño puede ser muy violento. Gran parte de la actividad de los sacerdotes, de los hechiceros, las hechiceras, era precisamente predecir el clima, tanto para la agricultura como para la vida común y corriente, incluida la pesca. La predicción era observar los cambios que se daban tanto en el mar como en las tierras. En el mar era tratar de ver qué moluscos estaban apareciendo, cuáles estaban desapareciendo, y eso se ve a partir de mayo. Entre mayo y junio de cada año, los pescadores observan si apareció tal tipo de pez, si desaparecieron tal tipo de conchas, si aparecen tales o cuales indicadores cerca de la playa. Eso es observado y transmitido.
El Niño brought life, the water that made the crops grow. But sometimes it also brought destruction, catastrophes, and death. Thanks to the priests' weather predictions and to the construction of irrigation canals, the Moche managed to turn the desert into a lush garden. They achieved a level of corn production that was twice what it is nowadays. Today we know that the corn they grew in pre-Columbian America was the result of primitive genetic experimentation starting from wild corn. The growth of the crops was linked to the cosmic relationship that they had with their gods. The earth was considered sacred. Priests, shamans, and rulers all watched closely the progress of the crops. The result of the harvest was equal to the degree of satisfaction or dissatisfaction of the gods with the offerings and sacrifices that had been made. The Mochicas knew how to renew the soil. They oxygenated it by working it with their hoes and fertilized it with guano. This guano, which was the massive accumulation of the droppings of seabirds, wasn't easy to get. Because of its high concentration of nitrogen and phosphorus, guano is a magnificent fertilizer. The largest guano deposits were on the islands, some of them many miles away, and with steep cliffs that made it very difficult to tie up their totora reed boats. Very few are left along the coast today, but in the days of the Moche, there were numerous guano deposits on the seaside promontories and stacks. They weren't easy to access either. In addition, the El Niño phenomenon washed the rocks and the guano would disappear for years. Two ceremonial wells have been discovered at the El Brujo archaeological complex. They were dug in a spiral. They may have been used to measure the phreatic water level and be able to predict the arrivals of El Niño. They may also have been the scene of shamanic cleansing and curing ceremonies. The officiant would have used coca leaves to make a diagnosis, and the water to purify the sick person's spirit.
Gran parte del éxito de los sacerdotes en el antiguo Perú era poder predecir eso. Y la predicción de eso está en el manejo del niño, que es lo que sabía hacer esta gente.
The Mochica learned how to predict the behavior of the El Niño phenomenon. Proof of this was found in a royal tomb in the southern wall of the Cao pyramid. Apparently, it was intact. Given its large size, it must have belonged to a very important personage. The archaeologists' disappointment was tremendous. When they lifted the carob tree beams that sealed the funerary chamber, they discovered that the tomb was empty, but the tomb had not been looted. It was the Mochica themselves who, before one of El Niño's visits, had rescued the tomb's contents and buried them again elsewhere, in a place that so far has remained a mystery. The Moche pyramids, like the Mayan pyramids, were not mausoleums like those in Egypt. Every so often, the building was ceremonially buried and a new temple was built on top of it. Objects like these were offered during the burial rites at the four buildings of the Cao pyramid, built over 5 centuries. In the laboratory at the El Brujo archaeological complex, the work to unwrap the bundle continues. Under the direction of the archaeologist Arabel Fernandez, a specialist in textiles, the technicians slowly but gradually removed the cloths of the funerary bundle. In all, some 250 linear meters of cloth, more than 158 square meters of cotton fabric. They are drawing close to the mummy itself, which lies on a cane bed. The first of the 23 layers they removed and recorded were cloths embroidered with drawings of pencil catfish and ocean waves. Cotton was the Mochica's most important non-food crop. its singular variety of natural colors, white, brown, reddish, and purple, still survives in Peru. The weavers employed various techniques based on the backstrap loom that they used to make single or double weaves, plain textiles, and slotted textiles. They finally remove the last layer of cotton fabric. A gold plate covers the mummy's face. Its grave goods of gold, silver, and turquoise jewelry evidence the levels of subtlety and refinement that the Moche culture reached in jewelry making and working precious metals. The mummy's hair is taken up in 2 braids that make her look gentle and feminine, in contrast with the harshness of the dislocated jawbone.
En los últimos años, nuestro conocimiento de las poblaciones Moche ha ido aumentando. Y esta momia realmente ha sido una gran contribución, porque no existían momias Moche. Esta es la primera que conocemos con su contexto, con el drama del episodio de su muerte, detalles sobre su salud, sobre su crecimiento. Entonces, entre la combinación de datos biológicos y datos culturales, la importancia de este hallazgo es que nos abre una enorme ventana al mundo del pasado Moche.
The preparation of the lady's cadaver would have been carried out in private. The Moche rulers were considered demigods. Nobody could look at them directly. They were half human, half divine. And for that reason, it's assumed that it was the priestesses who were responsible for preparing her for her journey to eternity.
En el caso de esta momia, todo indica que estamos tratando con una momia natural. No hay evidencia de un proceso de embalsamamiento, o sea que se han retirado los órganos para garantizar la conservación. Tampoco hay un tratamiento que haya protegido la piel, que la haya convertido en cuero, que es lo que habría permitido una mejor conservación. Hay una conservación natural, no necesariamente espontánea, porque puede ser que hayan usado algunos materiales, hierbas, que hayan ayudado a impedir la actividad de los insectos, que es algo que se ha logrado. El uso del cinabrio es más una coloración que tiene una valoración para temas religiosos, temas del rito. No sabemos que haya tenido un uso en conservar el cuerpo.
Cinnabar, or mercury sulfide, was used by the Mochica in rituals. They may have attributed certain magical qualities to it. Its intense red color was associated with blood, the liquid of life. The lady's body was anointed with seawater, and cinnabar was applied as a kind of makeup to preserve the cadaver from insects, given that the subsequent bundling process would last many days. The priestesses that prepared the body signed their death sentences. Cinnabar is a deadly toxin. The absorption of mercury through the skin and its inhalation cause irreversible damage. It may have been a sort of voluntary sacrifice in honor of their queen. Once the body had been anointed, they placed a gold plate over the lady's face and another over her heart. The tattooed lady hid her visage forever. The red cinnabar and the luminous gold would serve to identify her noble lineage in the afterlife. It's still not known with certainty if the companions buried in other tombs were sacrificed when the lady died. They may be secondary burials, that is, they may have been exhumed from their tombs and reburied beside the lady. Among the Moches, there was a practice, one which has barely been studied, of exhuming the bodies of their dead on certain occasions, such as when the El Niño phenomenon was going to hit. The 5 graves were dug at the same time. The The smallest one holds a sacrificed adolescent. In the 3 tombs found at the foot of the wall decorated with pencil catfish lie 2 personages who were strangled, a priest and a fisherman. The most important one is the central tomb, which contains a priest with a human offering, a teenager strangled just as the tomb was being sealed. The lady's grave goods include a leather vest decorated with feathers and sheets of golden metal around a face of gilded copper with eyes of encrusted seashell and mother of pearl. Faith in transcendence, in life after death, was a central pillar of the Moche's beliefs. That is why their funerary rites are so complex. They are true testimony to the future of their vision of the cosmos and of their way of life. On their journey to the afterlife, they took everything they owned with them, sometimes even the closest members of their entourage, as in the case of the Lord of Sipan. Nobody inherited any material goods. The burial of the Lady of Cao may have been like this. A goddess had died, and her funeral rites had to be particularly strict as regards the liturgy of death. In this way, she was ensured that she would not find obstacles in her path on her way to the underworld. It's possible that the children and adolescents who were sacrificed at the burials of the highest rulers were charged with the mission of leading the spirit of the dead personage to the home of the gods, as in other ancient cultures. They were still pure beings and could easily find the path to the afterlife. The bones of a teenage girl were found in the lady's tomb. The noose with which she was strangled was still around her neck. Among the offerings, a particular piece of pottery drew the archaeologist's attention.
Esta pieza de cerámica Moche I de Caolín fue descubierto dentro de la tumba de la señora de Cao. Representa una actividad de curanderismo, donde observamos a una maestra curandera con un manto en forma de payar que está imponiendo su mano en el ombligo de una niña que se encuentra en brazos de su madre. Para nosotros, esta pieza representa la vida de la señora de Cao durante su infancia.
The Mochica didn't have writing, but they captured their way of life and their beliefs on pottery and in the iconography that they drew on it. Men, gods, animals, plants, and complex ritual or everyday scenes were depicted by the artists. Their pieces of pottery, also called huacos, substituted for written expression and told their story in another way. Potters were held in high social esteem. The enormous quantity of pots found in the archaeological digs indicate the importance given to the pottery workshops. Most of their work was destined to be used as funerary offerings. They did not use a potter's wheel. The pottery used every day was made with the hands and blows of a paddle, a technique known as paleteo. The ornamental pieces were made with molds created by sculpting clay. The so-called huacos retrato, or portrait pottery, are recognized as classical works according to the universal artistic canons of perfection and realism. Mochica art is amazingly expressive and precise. The imperturbable and haughty faces, or the serene ones that look so deep into the viewer's eyes, are true portraits in clay, comparable to the sculptures of ancient Europe, Africa, and Asia. The habits and customs of this 2,000-year-old civilization are amply portrayed in detail in their pottery. They reflect a very hierarchical society with a dominant class of priests, warriors, and nobles. Below them were the artisans. Further down figured the fishermen and farmers, and finally came the common people. The pottery also describes religious ceremonies, such as human sacrifices, and features very profuse depictions of ritual combat. On the murals of the central patio of the Huaca de la Luna, considered the Sixtine Chapel of Moche art, we see representations of these fights and of the subsequent sacred executions of the losers. The fights were held in particular places in the desert. They weren't large-scale battles, but rather individual clashes. The ones who fought had been chosen to represent the various factions. Those who lost, but who hadn't been killed by the blows of their lethal battle clubs, were stripped bare and led to the temple. The winners hung the losers' weapons and clothing from their battle clubs. In the sacred rooms of the sanctuary, the winners paid their respects to the ruler and gave him the weapons of their adversaries. The defeated remained in the custody of the priests until they were sacrificed at the top of the pyramid. They continue to recover the jewelry that the lady was wearing. Among them, 42 gold and silver nose rings, which clearly depict the mystical duality of the Moche.
Some of the most beautiful objects, I think, are the narihueras, the nose ornaments. These are interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, not all ancient Peruvian societies used narihueras, these nose ornaments, but the Mochica had some of the most gorgeous and beautiful ones, and the collection from the Lady of Cao are among the most magnificent of these examples. They are little miniature masterworks, each one, in the way they use concepts of dualism, both in terms of the symbolism and in terms of the use of different kinds of metals. They're really treasures, and it's one of the most spectacular parts of this great discovery.
The tattooed lady's grave goods are clear evidence of the Mochica's level of technological development and of the exquisite work they achieved with precious metals. The mummy was the object of a thorough forensic study, which threw light on valuable data about her life and death.
Estamos tratando con una mujer que murió muy joven, muy joven, encima de los 18 años, pero no más de los 22, 23, y era pequeña como la mayoría de las mujeres andinas lo somos, 1,45 m, 1,50 m. Pocas veces uno encuentra un cuerpo que también te da información sobre el drama alrededor de la muerte. En este caso, en las radiografías y en el análisis de los huesos, queda claro que la cintura pélvica se había anchado, ampliado, dentro de un proceso de alumbramiento, pero eso se complementa con la piel del vientre, que al secarse se ha reducido toda esa amplitud para dar crecimiento al feto. Y también si miramos los senos, estaban pues grandes, amplios, y todo esto en conjunto tiene que ver con una mujer joven que murió poco después de dar a luz.
Apart from a ceremonial patio, all the Moche pyramids have sacred sections, chapels like the tomb of the Lady of Cao. There is always a small room in one corner. It's theorized that this is where the ruler dressed like a god before the rituals. These are the transmutation rooms. In the building constructed between 300 and 400 AD, the eastern wall is decorated with bas-reliefs of manta rays, which is evidence of how important the sea was to the Moche. They were skillful fishermen. With their small boats made of totora reeds, they went out to sea to the schools of fish. They used cotton nets, which they joined to small gourds that served as floats, and to stones that worked like weights. They also built large rafts that they used to make long journeys to get the sacred muyu, the Pacific thorny oyster.
El muyu es esta concha, esta bivalva, que se recolectaba y se llevaba para que los dioses la consuman y la guarden. Estas conchas, spondylus, princeps, eran recogidas, se llevaban a los templos y se entregaban a los sacerdotes, normalmente entre el mes de junio y julio, con el objeto de que los sacerdotes las observaran, averiguaran de dónde viene y en función de eso dijeran si ese año iba a haber sequía, si ese año iba a llover, si no iba a llover. O sea, era una de las partes importantísimas en el proceso de predicción del clima.
The temple assistants ground up the spondylus shells to get the sacred powder that they used as offerings in their ceremonies. It was the food of the gods. It was always present at the burials of the high-level rulers and nobles. With spondylus shells, they made necklaces of small cylindrical beads, bracelets, and the gorgets that the military leaders wore.
Y por eso hay todo un camino del Muyu, hay toda una ruta del Muyu que va desde la costa norte del Perú, que era el núcleo donde estaba este desarrollo, hasta tan al sur como Santiago de Chile y tan al norte como toda la región de Esmeraldas, aunque ahí el Muyu abunda.
The boats that made the journeys in search of the Muyu are amply represented in Moche pottery, as are the little totora horses or reed canoes that the fishermen on Peru's north coast still use today.
En la sociedad moche de hace cientos de años atrás, solamente los hombres y mujeres de alto estatus social llevaban tatuajes en el cuerpo. Y ella, como vemos, tiene tatuajes de serpientes, arañas, el animal lunar, figuras geométricas. Esto, sin lugar a dudas, significa que esta mujer, aparte de haber ostentado el poder político de esta sociedad, también tenía poderes sobrenaturales para curar.
On this pot, which is on display at the José Casinelli Archaeological Museum in the city of Trujillo, we can see the tattoos on the arms of the shaman who is healing a sick man by laying his hands on him. They are identical to those of the Lady of Cao. Healers were very highly respected. They enjoyed high social status. They employed numerous medicinal plants, some of which came from the jungle. The Lady of Cao undoubtedly took part in particular healing processes, most certainly involving sick people from the highest social classes. Her presence would have caused a combination of fear and respect, as she was considered a demigod. It is likely that during the healing ceremonies she wore her sacred robes, which symbolized her divine essence. She incarnated Chicopaik, the god of the sea and the moon, as opposed to Ayabaik, the god of the earth and the sun.
Esta señora es una pitonisa, seguramente, la que avisa de qué cosa es lo que va a ocurrir en el futuro, pero al mismo tiempo también debe ser una curandera, o sea, toda persona con poder mágico puede curar, puede hasta matar.
At the foot of the Cao pyramid, they still carry out shamanistic ceremonies in which they drink the hallucinogenic juice of the San Pedro cactus. The healers still make their tables here, as they call these ancestral ceremonies. This archaeological complex receives its name, El Brujo, or the witch doctor, from these esoteric practices. The ones performed at the Cao Viejo pyramid are for healing. At the Huaca Cortada pyramid, they found evidence of black magic ceremonies. It would seem that the Moche's mystical duality still persists. "1,700 years ago, the Moches also consumed the San Pedro cactus in order to be able to perceive the underworld. Those who were going to be sacrificed made ready in underground rooms. The vulture women depicted in the iconography on Moche pottery were in charge of bringing serenity to the people who were going to die. In an atmosphere heavy with incense, those who had lost in ritual combat consumed San Pedro cactus. When the sun came up, they would climb to the top of the pyramid to offer their lives to the gods. Six months have gone by since the Lady of Cao's funerary bundle entered the laboratory. The work of unwrapping the bundle is coming to an end. The conservators remove the 23 ceremonial spear throwers that lie on a cane bed. These spear throwers could launch their projectiles more than 70 meters. They were used to hunt and in combat. After they had been cleaned, they once again became true gems of Moche metalworking. They are made of wood and covered with gilded copper, adorned with birds and the heads of important nobles. This was the first time these weapons had been found in a woman's tomb. The Mochicas knew how to gild copper 2,000 years ago, something quite remarkable considering that the Europeans couldn't manage to do it until the technique of electrolysis was invented in the late 18th century. They also restored the two ornamental battle clubs that flanked the bundle. They were undoubtedly a symbol of the power that the enigmatic tattooed lady enjoyed. In all, they recovered 15 necklaces of gold, copper, and semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli and turquoise. 2 of her 4 dresses were in a perfect state of preservation. One was embroidered with pencil catfish motifs, and the other was painted with the waves of the sea. In layer 18 of the bundle, they found the weaving and sewing tools that the lady may have used while alive, 64 wooden spindles, 6 gold needles and 1 copper needle, and 13 balls of virgin cotton.
En el caso de la señora de Cao hemos encontrado 4 coronas, 4 diademas que la acompañan. En los últimos estudios que estamos realizando hemos encontrado que una corona le pertenece a ella y las otras 3 no. Las otras coronas probablemente corresponden a otros gobernantes quienes donaron sus insignias de poder y fueron colocados dentro del fardo funerario.
The Lady of Cao's grave goods are on display at the recently built on-site museum. These rooms gather together the finds made in the last few decades at the El Brujo archaeological complex. When we had finished filming the mummy, the museum management granted our film crew the honor of depositing her in her niche in the treasure chamber. For security reasons, visitors can contemplate her in a mirror. The murals that decorated the facade of the ceremonial patio at Cao Viejo are the same as the ones at Huaca de la Luna. On each level, a different motif is represented. Those who are heading to the sacrifice, the officiants holding hands, the spider god. Although each valley was home to a different kingdom, all of them featured the same religious and political organization, the same architecture, and the same iconography. They always built 2 pyramids as a reflection of the Mochica's mystical duality, the Huaca de la Luna, or of the moon, for religious matters, and the Huaca del Sol, or of the sun, for military matters. Just like at El Brujo, the Huaca de Cao, and Huaca Cortada. The murals in the ceremonial patios depict the rituals involving human sacrifices.
We know that human sacrifice was practiced in ancient Peru, among the Moche and other cultures, as it was around the world. The question is, how does that relate to politics, religion, warfare, and all these other questions which we're studying today? It seems that in the several hundred kilometers that Moche culture existed in, and the several hundred years in which it existed in, that human sacrifice may have varied considerably through time and space. It's very likely that she was involved in it, but how important, we don't really know.
The noble warriors defeated in ritual combat were carried in stretchers to the very top of the pyramid, where the ceremonial sacrifices were performed. In the iconography on the pottery, we can see depictions of the sacrifices. The vulture women are always present.
En Moche, la cantidad de sacrificios humanos que había, y hay evidencias concretas y directas en el caso del lugar donde fue encontrado la señora de Cao, indican actos bastante difíciles de entender en nuestro tiempo. Personas que son destrozadas, personas que han sido casi trituradas, que han sido partidas en muchos pedazos, con sacrificios humanos probablemente muy cruentos. Debemos asumir, suponer que ella los veía, pero tenemos que entender que el sacrificio humano, dentro de la perspectiva que ellos tenían de eso, es muy distinto al que nosotros imaginamos en general.
The priests assigned the kind of execution to be used in each ritual. They decapitated the victims, slit their throats, strangled them, threw them off cliffs, or smashed their heads with enormous clubs.
Los sacrificios humanos tienen que ver con la capacidad que tiene el ser humano de entregar ofrendas a los dioses para que se cumplan determinado tipo de demandas y necesidades. A veces se sacrifica a una persona para que llueva, se sacrifica a una persona para que no haya las destrucciones, los terremotos y demás que se dan. Todo eso, desde luego, en nuestro tiempo, que conocemos científicamente cuál es el origen de estos fenómenos, nos llama mucho la atención y nos parece que es una barbaridad. Pero no, cuando se piensa que son las divinidades las que están generando estas cosas que, entre otras, también originan la vida humana.
Those who weren't nobles climbed to the top tied up and escorted by warriors. They might be captured enemy soldiers, prisoners convicted of some crime, or people chosen by the priests. Apart from the ruler, only the priests and high-ranking soldiers could witness the executions. The esplanade on the upper level of the pyramid was a sacred place that was forbidden to the people. The chief vulture woman received the sacrificial victims at the gate to the temple where they would be killed. When times were particularly difficult for the community, there were voluntary sacrifices. Nobles would cut their carotid arteries and bleed to death. The god Chicopaic, incarnated in the Lady of Cao, would make an appearance at the top of the pyramid. The people would stand still, waiting expectantly in the ceremonial patio. The grand priest approached the lady and gave her the ritual cup holding the blood of the sacrificed. It was the climax of the ceremony of death. The god's will had been fulfilled.